In this presentation today, we'll be looking at the newly released bonzai3d 3.0, which is a major update to bonzai3d with over 80 new features, including 14 new tools. Many of the existing bonzai3d tools have been improved and modified to make them even more powerful and flexible. And similar improvements have been made throughout the interface, including some internal changes making it easier and faster. Now, I don't have enough time during our short 30-minute presentation to highlight all the new tools and features that are in bonzai3d 3, so I would like to invite you to our website. So if you go to bonzai3d.com, and there's our homepage, you can click on the bonzai3d products section, and there's all sorts of information about all the new features that are in bonzai 3. I would also like to invite you to download this little PDF file. If you were to click on this link right here, that actually downloads a 13-page PDF file, which gives you a lot more detail about all these new features and enhancements that are in this new version of bonzai3d. And in addition to that, in this PDF, there's even links. So as you're reading through all this detailed information for all these features, you can actually click on the link. It takes you right to that page of the online manual, which is going to highlight that new feature in the program. So with that, I'm pretty excited to start showing you some of these features. So let's go into the new bonzai3d 3.0 version. Now there's a lot to show here. Let's begin by looking at maybe a few interface preference type enhancements to bonzai3d. And we'll look at our preferences options here. Now in the previous version, if you wanted it to remember your previous session, you would have to save a preference file and set that up for you. Well, now it's a little bit different in 3.0. When you relaunch, it's going to actually remember everything from the previous session. So if you want something other than that, then you can actually select the custom preference file option. And with that, you can also tell it what happens when you quit bonzai3d. So you can even save the previous session, you can not save the previous session, or you can ask or be prompted every time you quit whether you want to keep the previous session or not. There's a few other things peppered in throughout here. For example, you can customize some of the tools. You can change the tint, the color, intensity, things like that to sort of customize those tools. If you look at the auto save options, there's little enhancements in there so it can automatically save your rendered images when you're doing your preview renderings and things like that. So there's all sorts of neat little things peppered in throughout there. Now, we also moved the project settings from the help pull down. Now it's in the file pull down because it really is more of a project specific setting option. And the only one thing I want to show in here is that if you click on the project files, we added a couple new features here which can help to drastically reduce your file size for large complex projects. One thing you can do is turn the keep render mesh off, so when you're working in shaded mode, it's keeping a internal mesh so it can render everything for you. And you can actually turn that off so that doesn't have to save with the file. That'll drastically reduce the file size. You can also turn off the option to keep the textures. As you recall, in version 2.5, when you save your file, all the texture mapping information is embedded inside that project. If you turn this off, then you can actually keep or prevent that texture map information from being saved in the file. So that'll reduce the file size too. Just make sure you carry those externally linked files with the project when you carry it somewhere else. We also have some other compression options. So even if you do keep the textures, you can go in and actually compress the textures inside the file. So these are just some ways to reduce the file size of your projects. All right. Now we've also enhanced the getting started dialog. Now, of course, we had this in the previous version, but now we've also added the capability to quickly access the self-guided tutorials, and these are a real neat way to get a jump start with bonzai3d. And we've also updated those to the new features that are in 3.0. Now these take advantage of the scenes palette. We've also added another new little feature inside the scenes palette. We now have these little arrows which allow you to go through the different scenes. Now this is a normal presentation tool that is in the previous version, so you can save scenes, and this saves lighting information. You can turn layers on and off and have each of these scenes set up so when you present it to your client, you can just go through the different scenes. And now in this new version, we've actually added some arrows to be able to quickly go forward and backwards through all those scenes. Now we also use this capability in the self-paced tutorial files so that you can actually go through the scenes. We tell you what to do on the left and you do it yourself on the right hand side. And so it's a real quick way to learn a lot of this introductory features of Bonsai. And like I said, those are updated to the new tools and features that are in this latest version. All right. And I would also like to mention that all of our documentation is now online. So if you were to right click any tool and choose the manual option, now instead of opening a PDF file, it actually goes to our online documentation. It goes right to that page. So it's a lot easier and quicker to be able to access and research all the information for the different manual information for those different tools. All right. With that, let's look at some other new features that are in 3.0. Let's see. Well, let's say we're working on a large project, maybe some kind of urban plan or something like that. Okay. And the first thing that we're going to look at is the new display types. So in the previous version, you saw that you could actually select the different display types up near the top here. So I'm going to go to wireframe or shaded work or render zone and things like that. And if we wanted to modify any of those display type parameters, we would have to go into the display options palette. Now, what we've done in 3.0 is we've actually added those display icons inside of this palette. So now what you can do is actually move through your different display types, and all the parameters are right there in a one-stop shop location here to be able to maybe turn edges on or off or shadows on and off for each of these modes. Now also notice that if we go into the rendering modes, which is the next 4 modes here, we have hidden line rendering, we have sketch rendering, we have doodle rendering, we have a render zone global illumination rendering mode. When you click on those, it doesn't automatically render the scene. It doesn't render until you click the render button. And the reason for that is that you can change all these parameters first, because usually these rendering modes might take a little bit longer to process, and so you want to make sure you have your options set up just right, and then when you're ready, you can then click the render button, and that'll go ahead and execute that rendering mode. So now that we can see it, we can still have access to all of our display options, change any parameters, you click the update, and it'll automatically update. All right, so that's just another new little feature to be able to quickly access all that information in one area. All right, what else do we have that's new in 3.0? Well, there's a new turntable tool. So if I look up in the navigation tools here, I can make that active. And up towards the top, you can see that I can actually just click the play button, and we can spin that thing around. We have this little tortoise and hare slider to sort of increase or decrease the actual speed. And of course, if you're doing product design or something like that, there's different options here to control whether you're spinning around the X, Y, or world axis, or the object's axis, or whatever. So just another way to present your model. Let's see, we also have a new sun position palette. So let's take a look at that. We go to the palettes pull down. Here's a brand new palette that's in 3.0. Now, you were able to position the sun in previous versions using the database. If you went into the light parameters, you went through a couple layers of different menus, you could get into the database, and we've made this easier to access. Now all that information is just in one floating palette, and you can quickly choose any city, any part of the world. If I were to take the time slider here, you can see I can dynamically modify the time of day as I drag that back and forth. And of course, you can also change the day of the year. So I can move the slider back and forth, or I can actually choose the month and date in those little pull down menus there. All right. And you can also automatically animate this. I just click the play button, and you can see that I didn't have to set up any animation parameters. The animation stuff is already set up for me. And if we want to increase or decrease the speed, we can just move that slider back and forth. And if we want to export this out to an actual QuickTime movie or a Windows AVI file, you just click the export option, and there you have a movie that you can either present to your client or to your colleagues. All right, so we've sort of simplified that whole sun positioning system now in bonzai3d 3.0. All right, let's see if we can find some other new features that are in this program. There's over 80 new enhancements, and these are a lot of things are just additional parameters added to some of the existing tools. For example, let's say I'm working on this big urban plan and I want to start working in this area. Just like in the previous version, I can use the define reference plane tool, click on the face of an object, and now my working plane is in that area. Then I use the edit reference plane tool, just like in the previous version, and I can move the controls to sort of control the size and location of where that reference plane is. But what we've done in this new version is add some new buttons over here on the right hand side. So you can see I can do things such as maybe select a bunch of objects, and then you can see I can select the edit reference plane tool, and now I can actually choose options such as center the reference plane in the middle of the selected objects. I can extend the reference plane to all of the selected objects. I can then flip it Y, Z, or ZX based on where it's at in that scene. I can even align it with my current view, so I know my reference plane is facing perpendicular to my current view parameters. So there's all sorts of neat little additional little added little parameters to a lot of these features inside of the new version of Bonzai. All right, with that, let's look at some other new tools. Well, here's another new one. It's the billboard tool. What this lets us do is import an image and automatically map it onto a 2D flat polygon. Now, there's a lot of uses for this. One of the uses is for billboard type objects, like maybe plants or trees or people that you want to quickly place some entourage into your scene. So here's how the billboard tool works. Just simply click on that tool. And then over here on the right-hand side, you can load any pixel image. So I click the load button. This image right here, plant.tiff. So we downloaded that from the internet. All right, so there's a nice plant. So now you can see all I do is load the image, and it automatically creates the polygon, creates the material, maps it on there one by one times, and where it's ready to be placed into the scene. Okay. There's some parameters we can use to adjust this. We can control the cursor position, maybe in the bottom middle, so we can accurately control where we place that billboard item. We can also place it perpendicular to the plane, and we can also align it with the current view. So now if I were to click to place that item, you can see as I spin my view around, that billboard item is constantly looking at my current camera angle. So that's good for 2D entourage type items. And also notice if you look in the material palette over here, that it automatically created this material for me. I didn't have to create that. Now if I were to double click on that, you can see that I can go back and edit that if I want. I can maybe add a transparency map. So what I'll do is load that exact same image. There it is right there. And use the alpha channel information to clip out the background. And now the background is transparent. So now we don't have to see the black background. Now, of course, we can see the wire edges there, but if we're in shaded full or in a render zone rendering mode, we're not going to see that line or edge information of that polygon. All right, another great use for this is to bring in a underlay image that you can actually sketch over. So for example, if I were to select the billboard tool, and let's say I do a hand sketch, I scan it in, now I have a pixel image, so what I can do is load that in, so I can use that as a underlay to trace over. So here's an image, let's bring that in, click OK. Now in these options over here, notice before I click to place that in the scene, I can actually make it flat on the plane, and there's also some scaling options. So if I know the scale, I can actually set the scale here. I can give it the overall size, or maybe an 1/8 inch equals a foot, or any parameters we want to be able to control how the sizes of that image map when it's placed in the scene. And there, I click and place it. Now I have a nice little underlay sketch that I can trace over. Now also notice as I zoom in, that image looks a little bit pixelated, and this is a same concept as in the previous version. If we want to increase the display resolution of image maps in our scene, we just simply go into the display options, and you can see in the shaded work mode, we can actually bump up the default resolution, which is pretty low. So I cranked it up to maybe 1024. And so now you can see we get a higher resolution image on any textures or any billboard type items like we see here. All right, so there we see a better view of our underlay sketch. All right, now let's say that isn't brought in at the proper scale. Let's say I don't know what the scale is. And so if I were to measure using the measure tool, of course the measure tool is a tool that's in 2.5 also. Here it is right here, measure. And you can click 2 points anywhere and it'll give you the actual distance. So I measure those 2 points and that's 13'2". Well, really that room, I want it to be about 30 feet. So let's go ahead and use one of the new features in the measure tool to automatically scale that object up to the proper size. Here's how this new feature works. What you do is you pre-pick any number of objects, you select the measure tool, and you can see there's some new options here which allow us to actually scale that measured object up. So I'll just sort of click on any 2 points anywhere in 3D space, and it says it's 13'2", but I'm going to type in 30 feet. And then when I click the update button, anything that's previously selected will then be scaled up that same distance. And there we go. Now we know that that space is now 30 feet. So that's just another way to use the measure tool. Now also, another thing in the measure tools, we can also do the same thing using reference plane underlay. So I'm not sure if you're the type of user that uses underlay sketches on, which is an image map on a polygon, or you use underlay sketches on a reference plane. Both methods work great. So let's quickly look at the other method here. Let's say I have a reference plane. So I'm just going to use the edit reference plane tool, and maybe I'll move the reference plane somewhere else in 3D space, rotate it forward. And notice that when we use the edit reference plane tool, we're actually creating our own custom reference plane. And that is automatically placed inside of our reference plane palette. So there's our first one there, and we can name it anything that we want. If I were to double click on that, you can see that we can actually load an image and it's automatically projected onto the reference plane. So let's load that same sketch image. So you can find it, here it is. right there. All right, and you can see it'll be placed on the scene. Now, of course, we have some scaling options here. So if we knew the scale, we could actually type that in, but I don't think I have a scale to that image. It's sort of a rough sketch, but if we had a scale, we could actually set that there, and so that image is now projected onto that grid. So it's not like a polygon with a material on there. It's just this image just sort of magically appears on the reference plane grid. Now, if we want to use the measure tool on this also, you can see that if I select the measure tool, I'll turn on the new option, which allows us to measure a reference plane underlay. And so now, as I go up here, I'll click any 2 points on that reference plane, type in the value that I want, such as 30 feet, click update, and you'll see that that image that's projected on that reference plane will then be automatically updated. So there's 2 ways of working with underlay sketches inside of 3.0. Okay, let's see what else we can find for some other new and interesting tools in 3.0. How about the new unfold tool? Let's take a look at that. Well, the unfold tool allows us to take any object that you build in Bonsai, and now we can unfold it flat, and so we can sort of fold it up. Maybe it's sheet metal or something like that. Now here I just did a quick little rapid prototyping model here at the office. I used the roof tool to create a 3D roof. I printed it out. I used the unfold tool to unfold it, and then I printed it out here at the office and took some scissors and tape and glue and made my sort of poor little 3D rapid prototype model here. So let's see how that process works. Now in this example here, I started off with the actual walls of the building, and then I used the roof tool, this is a tool that's in 2.5 also, so there's no new features with the roof tool, but I'm just going to create some object that we can unfold. So there we go. We got our roof and set some parameters. I don't make it solid, so whatever we want for that. Now, what I'm going to do is maybe delete the wall so we can clearly see that object that we're going to unfold. And I'm also going to delete the bottom face. I'm going to hold down the Command-Can Mac or Control-Can Windows, and I'm going to use the delete tool to delete just that face. So we're getting just a paper-thin surface shell of the object that we want to unfold. I mean, you don't have to delete that face, but that's how I want to do it in this case. And what I'm going to do is then use the unfolding tool, which is now added to the derived suite of icons. There it is right there. Okay, so now, when you unfold a object, it is important where you click on the object. So the face that you click on, the closest segment that you click to, is going to start the unfolding process. So it'll lay that flat at the origin, and then it'll start to unfolding along the direction of that object. So I'm going to maybe click over here on this face, maybe towards the bottom, and that face is placed at the origin, and then the unfolding then goes on from there. So if you want to change the configuration of your unfolding process, just click on a different face and closer to a different segment to control the direction of that unfold. All right, and there we go. We have a flat 2D unfolded roof. And there's some other parameters we can turn on. For example, we can generate connectors, so we can add those additional tabs to help us glue or tape those seams together. We can add some labels, and we can actually control the size of the text for those labels. So now here we can see, edge 3 goes with edge 3. Now, of course, this isn't a very complicated unfolding process, so it's pretty easy to see which edges match up with which. But on a more complicated case, those edge numbers or those labels will be a lot more handy. All right. Now, I probably should also mention that you can unfold more than just faceted objects. I mean, you can also unfold smooth curving objects too. So for example, if I had a maybe curved shape that looks like this, and let's use unfold tool on that, and it should unfold it fine. Now, it can unfold only developable surfaces, and what I mean by that is that's curving in one direction only. If you have a compound curve, like a convex and concave curve that's folding in multiple directions, then you can't unfold that as a smooth object, but you can still unfold that as a faceted object. And so there's some options down here at the bottom of the unfold tool that will let you control how you handle undevelopable type of faces and surfaces on that object. All right, so that's just another new tool in 3.0. Another new tool is the 3D print tools. If you're going to the 3D printing process, you can actually use the new 3D print prep tool. So let's take a look at that. Here's the Valencia Opera House that was done by John Alexander here at Autodesk's. This was a model that he made, and he printed it out in a Z Corp printer. Now, this is actually a photograph of the 3D printed model. And so before he sent this to the 3D printer, you want to make sure it's going to print right the first time. So you want to sort of analyze the model and say, is this thing going to print correctly? Well, we have a new tool called 3D Print Prep. It's down the very last row here. Let's pull that up. And with this tool, how this tool works is you click the tool, and there's all sorts of options that we can check for in the tool options palette. So if I expand that a little bit, you can see that we can choose the type of printer. Now, you don't even have to have a Z-Core printer. I mean, because really what matters is when you scale the model down, all these tests will be applied to your model regardless of the type of printer that you're actually sending it to. This just helps to automatically set some of these default scaling parameters for you. Now, with that, what are some of the things that we can check for? Well, we can click the all button and just go ahead and analyze everything for us if we want, or we can analyze these one by one. So for example, I can turn on the non-solids option because a 3D printer can only print solid objects. And so are there any non-solid objects in our model? Well, we choose that option, we click the execute button, and there it searches the whole model and it highlights any non-solid objects. Of course, the trees are billboard items, so those are flat. Those will not 3D print, so we need to either add true 3D trees in there, or we'll have to remove those for just for the 3D printing process. Now, this object back here, it says that's not a solid, so we'll have to investigate that, and maybe there's a surface missing on the end, so we can just cap the end off and make that a solid object, and so we'll have to investigate that. But you can see it can automatically highlight that, and you want to find out these things now before you send it to the actual 3D printer, because you get it back and a whole piece is missing, and you're going, why is that not there? And so if you can analyze it before, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. Okay, and there's a whole long list of other things we can check for too, like large volumes. So if I turn that option on, we click execute, and then it analyzes the model for large volumes. And what I mean by that is to sort of speed up the printing process and to save weight on the model and to save cost with the amount of material. Sometimes you have some large areas that will take longer to print. And so, for example, the base, it's saying, well, this is one solid object. So it highlights that and says, you know, this is a pretty large volume. And so you may want to reduce that by maybe carving out some cavities in there or something like that. Now, the base is pretty obvious. We probably could figure that out ourselves. But sometimes we'll notice some other interior objects that are rather big. And so it'll highlight those for us. And the list goes on and on. Thin objects, let's say you have a railing. And let's say in your model you have a 1-inch railing. Well, you take this 50-foot building, you scale it down to a little 1-foot model. That 1-inch railing becomes 0.0001 inches thick, and that might be too thin. And this will actually highlight those things before you send it out, so you'll be able to see that based on your scale factor that you set there. There's some new enhancements to the section tools. Let's go to our modify tools. We click on the section tool, and what's new in 3.0? Well, when I select all my objects and select the section tool, in the previous 2.5 version, you would have to click a face, and that face of some other object would define the elevation of the cross section or the direction of that cross section. Well, now you don't have to select the face of anything because there's a new dynamic section plane option. So you just have to click, and you can start dragging that, and you can see that you can dynamically create a 3D section of your model, so you can see exactly where you want to place that. So let's say we want to place it about here. And then we can set the options, make it 2D or 3D. And then when we're ready, we select the cut section button, and then it executes the section. So it's just a lot easier to use by being able to dynamically move it. You click the button and it cuts a section. You're done. You don't have to worry about positioning that face. Now, of course, the old method does work. If you're used to using it that way, you can still cut it by selecting the face of an object, and it'll still work the way it did in the previous version. Okay, this is a little more playful way of cutting those cross sections. All right, let's see, what else can we find for some new stuff that's in 3.0? Let's see. We've made some modifications to the contours tool. We have a 3D terrain tool, which allows us to generate a 3D solid terrain model from a series of contours, right? And let's try it with these contours and see what happens. So this is nothing new. This is in 2.5. You use the terrain tool for this, right? There it is right there, right? So if we take these contours and then we select the 3D terrain tool, we select our contour site, and it doesn't work. We get a message. So there's something wrong with our contours. Either we drew them wrong or we imported them from some other program wrong. And in version 2.5, you'd have to find those contours and fix them yourself. Well, guess what? In 3.0, we have a brand new tool that's going to fix these contours for you. Well, at least find them for you and attempt to fix them based on the severity of how bad those contours are. So you can see it automatically highlights those bad contours for you. So we know right away that those are the contours that are causing trouble for us. So now all we have to do is go to our new handy dandy contour doctor tool. Now, we use that tool the same way we use the 3D terrain tool. What we do is we select all of our contours, we select the contour doctor tool, and then it'll analyze. If you look in tool options over here, it'll analyze for all these possible problems that could exist with your contours. And there's an option here that says fix if possible. That means it'll even try to fix it for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn that on. I click on my boundary site. It analyzes everything and says, okay, it found 2 that were actually broken, 1 that was self-intersecting, and it fixed them all for us. So there, done. So now we can go back and use our 3D terrain tool, and that should work just fine now. So let's try it. Go to the terrain tool, click on our boundary site, and away it goes. So that should save you a lot of time by being able to quickly fix any bad contours when you either bring those in from some other program, or if you just, creating sort of arbitrary 3D terrains yourself, just draw a bunch of contour lines, you can make sure that those are all going to work for you. And of course, just like in the previous version, you can drop some aerial images on there to create your 3D terrains there. And that's a solid object, just like any other object, right? Carve some roads in there, things like that. Okay, let's see, what else can we find? There's some other new tools that are peppered in throughout this new version of Bonzai. Some of those deal with components. So let's take a look at some of those. Now here's a lounge, and we have a bunch of components in here. We have some light fixtures that are up here. We have some components for the furniture and things like that. So let's take a look at our component manager. And as we see, we have some components placed in there. And where are the component tools? Let's see, they're located right in here. So in version 2.5, there was 2 component tools. You can either create a component and you can place one. Well, now in 3.0, we got 3 additional component tools. One of them is the explode. And so now we can take an existing component that's in our scene, and with the explode tool, we can go ahead and quickly explode that component. There's a new replace component tool. What I can do is select some other component in my library, maybe this little lamp fixture here. And you can see if I select the replace component tool, I can click on one of those and it'll automatically be replaced with the other component. So it's just a little quicker way to try some design variations and experiment with different types of layouts. One of the other new features is the individual component. Like, let's say I want to change maybe this light fixture here, but I don't want it to affect all the other components that are in that scene. So if I use the individual component tool, I can take an existing component in the scene, I just click on it, and I can actually make a brand new component from that. So Matt's new lamp, click OK, and now it adds it to the component library over here, and it's a brand new component. I can change it, make copies of it, and it doesn't affect all the other components that are in that scene. All right, so just a few neat little features to help you out with your component management in your projects. All right, there's some new NURBS features. Let's take a quick look at those. Actually, we had a webinar a while back in which we sort of created this visualization of this front facade of this fancy type theater here. And we used all the NURBS tools that were in both bonzai3d and FormZ. Actually, if you go to our website, there's a webinars on demand page. You can watch all these that were previously recorded, and you can watch that. And we covered all 9 NURBS tools that were in Bonzai, plus the additional 7 that are in FormZ. So what's new in 3.0 is we've added some additional features to these tools. One of them is some new parameters that are inside of the NURBS extend tool. So for example, in that project, when we were working on the front facade, or the front wall here, we had these NURBS surfaces that were created, and we wanted to sort of create a larger gap between these 2 surfaces. And so we took the NURBS extend tool, we clicked on the edge, and we were able to drag that control line back and forth. Now, in bonzai3d 2.5, you could only visually do this. You can drag it any distance that you wanted, but you couldn't actually type in numeric information. Well, now in 3.0, we've added a lot of parameters to be able to numerically more accurately control these type of NURBS operations. For example, I can type in the extend trim length to be 2 feet. So now that extends back exactly 2 feet. So now if I do the same thing on the other side, I use NURBS extend, drag that inward, I can now type in a value over here, go 2 feet on this side, and now when I've extended both sides that same distance, I can maintain some sort of symmetry with that design by keeping that gap the same on both sides there. Okay. And the same thing was done with the other tools, such as merge. So for example, when we were building that front facade, we had some wood panels that were set up over here, and then we used the NURBS blending tool to be able to blend from this NURBS surface to these up here. And then, now that's nothing new, you could do that in 2.5. And then we wanted to merge those together, so we used the merge tool for that, and that's in 2.5 also. And you have these controls that you can drag, but what's new is now you can numerically control that accurately. So now what I can do is when I'm dragging the extend trim lengths, instead of just visually eyeballing it, I can go in here and type in some numeric information to tell it precisely the distance that I want to extend or trim those NURBS surfaces on that object. Okay. Now with the NURBS blend, there's actually some new features in that tool also. If I click on the NURBS blend tool, one of the new features that we have in 3.0 is you can now blend across multiple edges. Now in 2.5 you can only click on 2 edges, and that's it. It would blend from one to the other. Well, now in 3.0 I can actually click on maybe this edge over here, and then I can hold the shift key and click some other edges. So I click on this edge of the surface over here, maybe click on this edge down there, and now I have 3 different edges. And I click a blank area, and you can see that blending process now extends through multiple edges. And that's a really powerful feature to be able to, create more complex networks of NURBS type surfaces. All right. We've also added the capability to blend across non-NURBS surfaces. And so you don't have to use the NURBS blend tool just on NURBS objects. So for example, here I can take this front trim NURBS surface, which is defining the front entrance where all the doors are. And that is a NURBS surface here. I can click on the edge of that, but I want to blend to the back over here. And you can see all I did was draw a vector line. That's it. And I can actually blend to that line. It could be a spline curve. It could be any other type of shape. And so the NURBS blend tool works with non-NURBS type objects. So it just adds a lot more flexibility when working with more complex NURBS types of objects. All right. All right, with that, that's pretty much everything I wanted to show today. Like I said, this is definitely not all the new features in bonzai3d. Be sure to check out our website, bonzai3d.com. Go to the bonzai3d product page and look at all the features that are there. Download that PDF. Look at it. There's 13 pages there. And if you click on those links, it takes you right to that section of the online manual, which highlights all these new features that are there. And those links are embedded inside of that PDF file. So that's how you can get a lot more information. You can download a free trial. Hope everyone has a nice day, and we definitely want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to highlight some of these new features that are in bonzai3d 3.